Now that Game Pass prices have done nothing but go up, Microsoft decided that it was finally time for the Xbox Series S to follow suit, raising the price of both products. However, has completely destroyed their value. This guy is a game journalist, not a political talking head, so you shouldn't be surprised if he doesn't inject his personal politics into an article about video game consoles. And at the risk of upsetting some of my audience, if you care this much about politics in gaming that you can't even read an article comparing the value of two different consoles, then you're either a boomer or a bigger autist than me. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hard Light Network. That's right guys, it's only been a week, but we are already seeing the negative consequences of Microsoft's price increases for the Xbox Series consoles and games. In my last video on the channel, we covered these price hikes as well as a comment from an industry insider explaining why many companies are raising the prices for their games. However, in today's video, we're going to be covering how these changes could negatively affect the Xbox Series consoles as well as how they could snowball into further consequences down the line. But before we get into it guys, do me a solid and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future, and also don't forget to take to the comment section down below with your thoughts on this issue. Also, if you want to support this channel further, there are super thanks and memberships options down below. Be sure to join the channel today for access to exclusive content and perks that you can't get anywhere else. But without any further ado, let's get into today's article. Today's reading comes to us from thegamer.com and is entitled, "Microsoft has destroyed the value of the Xbox Series S. When the pitch is, quote, a budget-friendly console, and you make it not budget-friendly, what's left?" The Xbox Series S was an incredible deal. You could get a current-era Xbox console for $300, usually less, thanks to how often it was on sale. For anyone gaming on a budget, an Xbox Series S and a subscription to Game Pass would run you less than $400 up front, and you'd be able to play a good number of the most recent releases without breaking the bank. Now that Game Pass prices have done nothing but go up, Microsoft decided that it was finally time for the Xbox Series S to follow suit, raising the price of both products. However, has completely destroyed their value. It's easy to understand why the Series S was a runaway success for Xbox, outselling the more powerful and more expensive Xbox Series X for several financial quarters. It was cheap, and although its specs weren't particularly impressive, some people don't care about native 4K resolution and playing games at 60 frames per second if letting go of those things means that they'll be able to afford a console. The Series S appealed to anyone gaming on a budget, but also to casual gamers who didn't want to commit to spending $500 on a console they might only use a few times a month while gaming with friends. When asked about a good gaming console for new gamers before the Series S, I would usually exclusively recommend the Nintendo Switch, thanks to its $300 price tag and solid library of titles. But once it launched, the Series S jumped to the top of my recommendation list thanks to its value. With Microsoft's new prices for its hardware, the Xbox Series S now costs $380 for the 512GB model and $430 for the 1TB version. With tax, you won't be able to get the Xbox Series S, just the Series S, without any games, for less than $400. The console is still priced far below the Series X, which now costs $600. But if you're paying over $400 for a console, you'd expect its specs to be far better than what the Series S offers. The Series S is an underpowered machine that struggles with more and more games every year as they become more demanding. For a $300 price tag, the specs were fine enough in 2020, but 5 years later, the Series S has not aged well, and it's certainly not worth more than it was worth at the start of the generation. Priced at $400, there's no reason to recommend the Series S. If you're willing to spend $400 on a console, it's much more worth your investment to continue saving for an extra $100 or so and pick up a base model PS5. The price of the PS5 is still subject to change. We should expect it to increase following the price increase to all Xbox hardware, but there are plenty of deals where the PS5 costs significantly less than full price. Currently, there's a PS5 Slim bundled with a copy of Astro Bot listed on Walmart for just $402, which is a far better deal than what the Series S is offering for a similarly all-digital console. While the value of the Series S has gone down in time while its price has gone up, another part of what's made its value drop even lower is the rising cost of Game Pass. When it launched, the Series S was often described as a Game Pass machine, a console that proves the worth of Game Pass. For less than $400, you can play first-party games like Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite, plus the countless other third-party and indie titles available on the service. The value of Game Pass has gone down while its price has gone up too, though. Microsoft's new price tiering that vastly restricts the library for anyone not paying the highest price, the $20 per month price of Game Pass Ultimate paired with the Series S's $400 price tag, means that the Xbox budget-friendly console is no longer budget-friendly. With the new price of the Series S, I can't imagine anyone would willingly pick one up over a PS5 or a used Series X. It feels like it's so rare to see a company completely demolish the value of one of its most popular offerings. But we've seen Xbox do that several times over the years. Game Pass has steadily stopped being described as, quote, the best deal in gaming, as Xbox continually burned its fanbase by launching underwhelming titles and shutting down some of its best studios. It's possible that Microsoft eventually course corrects at some point down the road by lowering the price of the Series S again, but that feels unlikely. The Series S was a great experiment that showed how successful a budget-friendly console could be, but I'd wager that the experiment is over and Microsoft is going to go back to a single console at launch whenever it has new hardware to announce. It'll certainly save developers a big headache at the very least. While that is the end of the written article, there's still a few more things that I'd like to talk about. First, I'd like to read this comment from Kikapan, who sums up the general argument from most of the people in the comments section pretty nicely. Quote, cost of components and hell, everything really, are going up everywhere. While the stupidly high 145% US tariffs from China means that they have to recover their costs from somewhere, the US price increase ain't anywhere near enough to cover that, hence the price increase everywhere. The Series S prior price was before the great inflation of 2022, due to so much cash printing in a low-output economy during the pandemic. You can see gamers complaining about prices everywhere. PS5 Pro, Switch 2, graphics cards, etc. The truth of the matter is the world has seen a huge inflation of prices since the generation debuted at the end of 2020. It was unrealistic not to expect it to come to consoles and game prices. The mentality of, quote, prices going down / staying low was true in a low inflation environment of the last 40 years before 2022, but not a spike of inflation. And with the Trump tariffs just now hitting, get ready for even worse inflation if you're in the US. Like I said, this comment from Kikapan pretty much sums up everyone else's take, except with less Trump bashing. The rest of the comments on this article were pretty much dragging the author for not attacking Trump's tariffs more thoroughly, and I even had a comment on my last video saying that I should have addressed the issue as well. First of all, I'd like to state in defense of the author that this article was not intended to focus on the economic situation surrounding the Xbox price increases. It was about consumer value and finding the best bang for your buck. That's why there's an entire section of this article dedicated to comparing the value of a new Xbox Series S and a PlayStation 5. The point of the article is to highlight what the best purchase is for the consumer and why. Also, as a side note, this guy is a game journalist, not a political talking head, so you shouldn't be surprised if he doesn't inject his personal politics into an article about video game consoles. If you do a quick Google search for the author's Blue Sky account, like several people under the comment section did to make fun of him losing his job, you'll see that it's pretty obvious Peter is actually a leftist, so it's unlikely that he voted for Trump or supports his tariffs. Switching gears, I'm also not an economist, and I don't do political commentary anymore. I am a gaming YouTuber. However, for the sake of the argument, I'll dust off my politics hat and talk a little bit about the issue surrounding tariffs in relation to the video games industry. While it's absolutely true that the global economic conditions certainly have an effect on the manufacturing and distribution costs of these products, my argument is that this isn't the only reason for price increases. We all know that the hardware and software that runs these games have been getting progressively more expensive over the last 2 decades. There's not much anyone can do about the issue surrounding the tariffs. However, if this Reuters article is to be believed, along with many others, the 145% tariff on Chinese goods is subject to change in the near future. Not only that, but the tariffs are a bipartisan issue and are drawing criticisms from both sides of the political aisle. So much so that it's likely to be the biggest issue facing Trump during the 2026 midterms. And to top it all off, it doesn't really matter if the tariffs change for better or worse tomorrow, considering that Trump's only going to be in office for another 2.5 years. Besides, tariffs aren't the only factor in this equation. Like Kikapan said in his comment, inflation is also a major cause for these price increases. Inflation that kicked off at a time when the game industry in particular was flush with cash. And according to this PBS article, corporations were reaping record profits despite the rise of inflation because they were passing the costs onto the customer. Which brings us full circle to my final and actual point about all of these price increases. These companies are desperate for any excuse to increase the cost of their products. However, they don't have the same desperation to increase the quality or value of those same products. The price of games keeps going up, and development teams are larger than ever, but the games just keep getting worse. In 2020, I learned that politicking on the internet was a bigger waste of time than gaming on the internet. And at the risk of upsetting some of my audience, if you care this much about politics and gaming that you can't even read an article comparing the value of 2 different consoles, then you're either a boomer or a bigger autist than me. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much to everybody who has watched up to this point. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the content that I've got coming up for you guys in the future. Also, do me a solid and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on this issue. If you're in my audience, I really could care less what side of the political aisle that you're on. What I want to talk about is industry news, preservation, gaming, and whether or not those games are good. Personally, I'm just tired of seeing high prices being blamed on inflation, tariffs, or piracy when the games really aren't that good in the first place. And I'm tired of seeing the poor quality of games being blamed on everything except the developers, whether it's gamers not knowing what they want from the industry or the moon being in the wrong position in the sky. At the end of the day, none of this bad news actually affects my passion for gaming. I am a gamer, have always been a gamer, and will always be a gamer. That being said, we've got a lot more to talk about, so as always, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.